All right. Well, why don't we get started here? Welcome everybody to the March edition of the Arcadia Book Club. We're going to discuss The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan tonight. You've probably noticed James Bonin is not here. James is also feeling very under the weather and hardly has any voice. So he's sad not to be with us, but you wouldn't have been able to understand him anyway. So so let's get started. Let's dig into this book. I am going to read something though that James would have read had he been here. And this is from a new book by Eleanor Catton called Burnham Wood. Maybe coming to a book club near you in the future. We'll see. I started it and had to stop, and James is probably a third of the way into it. So it's going to be really good. So this part, this is kind of an environmental book, and this is all about, kind of plays into the School for Good Mothers with how we've pretty much, given up any sense of privacy. We carry these things around with us everywhere that, we can track. Everybody can track us. They know what we're buying or what we might buy or what we've searched for, where we've been. So we've given up a lot of our privacy. So from this book, it had taken Robert Lamone barely 20 minutes to execute the man-in-the-middle attack. He had first sighted Mira when she turned off the highway onto the gravel access road and stashed her bike in the patch of scrub, and had gone at once to his controls. By the time she reached the second gate, he had forced a connection with her phone, accessed her identifying information, obtained her stored encryption key, simulated her over-the-air transmissions, established a connection with the local mast, and then authenticated himself so that from that point forward, he could appear to be Mira's service provider as Mira's phone, and to Mira's phone as her service provider. Not only did he have complete access to her data, both present and historic, he also had the power to intercept and change her messages in both directions. Now, if he wanted, he could both alter what communications she received and send messages to anyone as her. It was a flawless capture. Had she ventured a little further up the gravel road, she would have come upon the trailer-mounted cable cell site fitted with an IMSI catcher device that he had used to carry out the operation. Had she taken her phone out of her pocket, she might have noticed that it was hotter than usual and less responsive, and that the battery was draining fast. And had she looked directly overhead at any time while she was exploring the farm, she might have seen, high above her, the dark blur of a surveillance drone hovering in place. Of course, she'd done none of these things, but that wasn't surprising. No one ever did. So all about giving up our privacy, how we're being monitored, and
Nancy, is Burnham Woods the woods in Macbeth?
It is.
Mm.
Yeah.
And does that tie in somehow?
It does.
Okay.
Yep. So, like I said, that might be a future book club book for us. So, School for Good Mothers. I call this book part 1984, part Handmaid's Tale, part Stepford Wives. So, I love this book. I read it about a year and a half ago when I got the galley for it. It's terrifying. And does anybody else, anybody love it? Anybody hate it? Have other feelings?
Well, this is my book. These are on my post-it note. I have to say, I have never read a book that conjured so many memories and feelings of being a mother, especially the mother of a small child, and all the angst and judgment and worry and blah blah. And I started making a list. I mean, all these things that I felt like, oh, I did this wrong. Oh, I remember this. I mean, I have this huge list. So I really felt so strongly for Frida. I mean, my heart went out to her, and I just completely hated and despised her husband.
Huh?
And Susanna, I just felt for her so. And this whole punitive system seemed dreadful to me. So those were some thoughts that it just felt so uber real to me.
Right,
Did you?
no one would listen to her. They were always listening to her, but no one would listen to her.
No,
She was
no.
never given a chance to claim her side of the story. I mean, what she did was horrible, of course.
Yeah. Was one horrible day, like they said, a few hours really when it boiled down to it.
Yeah. My 21-year-old son is sitting out in the bookstore and studying, and could probably, rattle off a list of a dozen things that are horrible.
Aw,
But that's human interactions, right?
right. I don't think you can ever be a perfect parent, because
No.
one choice always negates another, and it's just the whole matching of a parent and a child.
Right. So many of these parents were in a no-win situation because if they were involved, then they were accused of coddling.
Right. When that I can't think where it was, but when Frida has somebody observing her and she wants her to play a certain way, and she says, well, Harry isn't a seal, she won't play on demand. And it just seems so heartless to not have any understanding of the child involved and the mother, and just all that judgment. I've been reading a book. I thought I had it here, but I don't. I think it's called A Place Like Home by Ambrose, and it's his story of an upbringing in a very abusive situation with a mentally ill mother and homelessness, neglect, abuse, and getting on into the foster system. And that's the other end of the system, where the system isn't there for the children. It keeps returning them to these horrible situations, even when they feel they've escaped. So it's kind of interesting. It's been interesting to read those two. And then I was reading chemistry lessons, where the protagonist is so in love with, being a mother. So that was, despite her feelings that this wouldn't be what she wanted in life.
Lessons in chemistry.
Yeah, is it chemistry? What is that the right?
Lessons in chemistry, right?
Yes, I just returned.
And she probably would have ended up in the School for Good Mothers as well, because she was not a toddler. Yes.
Pardon me? Because what?
Not a toddler. She expected her child to learn and stand up on her own 2 feet. So I think part of the reason that this book is scary is because it's called speculative fiction, but you could kind of see how it could happen.
Sure.
One election went poorly for us. So how something like this could happen. And I think a lot of it is just the people that don't have the resources to advocate for themselves, that can kind of get caught up in that court system, like this book is. I mean, I know this one goes to the extreme, but I think every day there are people that can lose custody of their children. And right. Anybody else have anything they wanted to? Cindy?
Yeah, I do. I did not love this book, and I spent a whole lot of the book wondering what it is about the book that made you say it was your favorite book of 2022. Now, I come at it from a very different perspective, probably, than all the rest of you. I was a foster parent, so I have a different view of some of the things that come up in the book. I did not like the character for most of the book. She actually reminded me of Bernadette in Where'd You Go, Bernadette? Both of them being very privileged, very used to doing things their own way. And because of my foster parent background, I didn't believe her. I don't think the crime fit the punishment. Don't get me wrong, but I did not believe her that this was the first time that she ever walked out the door and left her child alone.
Mm.
So I struggled with the book. The middle, the second half was better, though I didn't like the ending. I was ready to pitch it in the garbage at the end. I thought, I don't like when you take a bow and try to wrap it around things, even if it's an unhappy bow. So that's my feeling.
Mhm. How would you have ended it?
That's a good question. I don't know. It just seemed too contrived for that. She felt she had nowhere to go, but I mean, it was sort of like Thelma and Louise driving off the cliff.
I thought it was a Thelma and Louise kind of ending too. And I mean, I almost wanted it to be more of a Thelma and Louise ending because you know she's going to get caught somehow. I mean, you know she's not. I mean, I wanted them to escape to some distant forest or something, you know, and
Right.
set up their lives. But you know that's not going to happen. You know she's going to get caught and probably end up in a worse place than the School for Good Mothers. I mean, in jail probably. So the end was disturbing. It was such a disturbing book. I mean, to echo what Janet said, I mean, I thought it was, I mean, I'm just a stepmother, so that's the perspective I bring to it, probably someone who's been overcompensating, trying to be a good mother, because stepmothers come in with a lot of strikes against them, but I thought it was such a remarkable portrait of, various types of maternal stress that can happen, I mean, to the best of people, I mean, I thought the mistake she made was kind of a big one, I mean, who leaves their baby for that long, but I mean, who hasn't turned around for 1 minute to look at what the other kid is doing, and I mean, well, the one kid falls down or something, so I thought it was really remarkable in that respect. And I thought the dolls were absolutely terrifying. They were so scary. And they were, I mean, the scariest part was the way that she begins to kind of care about her doll. I mean, especially, I mean, it was just so incredibly creepy. And the doll sometimes responds to her. And it was just really, really creepy. So, I mean, I don't love the book because I found the subject matter so difficult. But I thought her kind of clipped delivery. I mean, I thought she captured the kind of thought process that I felt like, the character would be experiencing. And I thought she handled sort of the brief flashbacks into memory really well. I mean, it's very complex. But I had to just read it a little bit at a time because I kept getting so disturbed by it, and I didn't want to have nightmares. So
the dolls kind of reminded me of Clara and the Sun, because then I felt sorry for the dolls because they seem like the training mothers who weren't really mothers at all. They just seem to be like, these are just tools. But then I started to think about Clara and these dolls, and I thought, oh, this is like, again, speculative fiction, but I could see why, because really they wanted to see them bonding with the dolls. So she was doing the thing they were supposed to be doing to show that she could bond, I guess. But that was the dolls were definitely disturbing. But I was I, I,
Lori, you're freezing on us a little, Lori.
dolls. I mean, I sort of felt like it's like, so I'm kind of excited to hear what she is, the author of the book. So she's going to be at Semicolon, which is in Chicago. I'm in Chicago.
You cut out on us a little bit, Lori.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the author, Jessamine Chain, she's going to be in Chicago next Tuesday night at Semicolon. It's a bookstore downtown.
Are you going to go?
I am going in.
Oh, excellent. All right.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see what she has to say about some of the issues in the book.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, I felt bad for Frida, but I also, again, I kind of like what you were saying, Cindy. Some of the things she kept going like off the rail, like when the fathers came in, and then she was hooking up with that dad, and I was like, she didn't make the best choices. But I think too, something that was kind of maybe glossed over is that she had been on, I guess, had mental health issues, and she had to go off of the medicine to have the baby, her husband, and I just felt, yeah, why wasn't the husband there? Just like, why was he was such a, kind of the problem, he was the problem, yet she was the person who was really being punished for something that he did. I had a problem with that. And his wife, some of the things she was doing sounded just as crazy to me as far as parenting. Like their parenting style wasn't any better. They didn't leave the child, I know, but it was very random as to who was getting punished and who wasn't getting punished.
Right, which I think is part of the frustrating part of the book, is that, yes, if you put a baby on a diet, that's way more detrimental than having your 12-year-old niece babysit.
Yes, exactly.
Larry?
So I'm going to preface my comments by saying I like dystopias. 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World are three of my favorite books. This book I did not like. I think the author is a good writer, and the fact I would categorize my experience as an angry read. I was getting angrier and angrier and angrier, and part of it is I don't think there was one character or person in the book that I liked in any way. And just to compare, I think in 1984, you identify with the main character who's trying to resist and who's trying to fight it. Or Lori mentioned Clara and the Sun. I love the character of the robot in there, and you really feel for the robot and stuff. But the main character frustrated me so much because I kept waiting for her to use her intelligence to either change her behavior more to adapt to her horrific situation, or like I kept waiting for her to rebel, and like if she was gonna get in trouble for touching the guy's hand, she might as well have done more. And then at the end, where she finally has some gumption and steals her kid, it was so poorly planned, and it was so obviously going to end in the tragedy. It was like too little, too late. Her husband, why did he ever even marry her? It didn't seem like he cared for her. His new girlfriend, wife, seemed like a loon. Her parents were terrible, which helped explain. But as someone who's been a teacher and now in county government, I couldn't believe every single social worker, counselor, judge, teacher, they were all despicable. Nobody showed her an ounce of humanity. I guess I liked the dad who let the son fall out of the treehouse the best, because he was the first person who at least listened to her a little bit, because I think, Nancy, you made a good point that no one listens to her. But like even the other women in the school, it's like, I didn't like any of them either. And I just wanted them, I wanted somebody to be at least a sliver of light, to show some rebellious spirit or nonconformity. And, she ended up conforming a lot, and she still was screwed. But I guess that's the point, because it was so horrific. And it's not that much of a stretch when you look at what's going on in this country with abortion and trans people and drag queens. It's like, I guess this is the logical extension. But as a former teacher, whoever designed the curriculum and the experiences, it was just, I don't know. I was just so frustrated the whole book. But I guess, again, I'm saying she was an effective writer, but I felt like she could have done something somewhere to give a little ray of hope, which I really didn't think there was any.
Right. So it's the nobody that's in authority has children. Remember, they're like, well, I have cats. I'm a mother to my cats, or I'm a mother to my nephews. That's not the same. Cats would like it if you left them alone for hours at a time. So I think there's that, and the way she writes, that's just like the impending doom that's coming. And I don't know, Cindy, maybe I like to torture myself a little bit. That's why I like scary movies and things like that. Maybe that's why it was one of my favorites of last year. But I liked how she wrote it, that you are feeling just as hopeless as Frida by the end, and frustrated. And I think that the roommate Beatrice, the college student who left the baby with the niece, she was a pretty redeeming character. I mean, she got caught up in hysteria, I think, too. But it is kind of that whole idea with the drag queens or with abortion, that people are making decisions that don't really have all the information, or don't listen to all the information. Allison, were you going to say something else?
I forgot what I was going to say. When Larry, when you were talking about her not rebelling, I mean, I was thinking, but if she did rebel, I mean, she was screwed. I mean, she was screwed anyway. But I mean, I thought it was a disturbing portrait of sort of mind control. I mean, what they were experiencing in that school. And yes, none of the people in control or designing the curriculum had kids, which is hard. It's like the hardest job there is, in my opinion.
But even before her incident, the fact that she literally had no friends, I really disliked the husband's best friend, Will, who I thought, was happy to sleep with her when she's totally vulnerable, and then was stupid enough, okay, you can come over, I'll leave for an hour. I mean, he was an idiot if he didn't know what was going on, yet he was even worse. At least the husband pretended to care about her at times. And, I thought she should have at least seen the bad father, because like I said before, he was at least kind. I mean, the main character needed a therapist badly.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, she needed a real therapist, not a counselor who, passed her off into this system. And I mean, the glimpses that we get of her background too, I mean, you know, the immigrant parents, the way that she was bullied as a child. I mean, you know, we sort of see generational difficulties being passed down there. And I mean, I didn't love her, but it made me have empathy for her, you know.
I mean, to Larry's point about her obvious lack of connections, I think she did need friends, and I don't think it was her fault that she didn't. I mean, she needed some compassionate people in her life, and she didn't have that, and her relatives were far away, and that's a tough situation at the best of times, I can tell you. So I really felt for her. I didn't think she was to blame. I felt like she was trying to do the best she could. She was trying to work, she was trying to be a good mother, she was trying to be a good daughter. I felt like she was trying so hard, and was in this sleep-deprived daze so much of the time where she just got desperate. So I felt kind of more compassion than blame. And to Larry's point at the end where she didn't plan, I mean, I thought she planned quite well, given that suddenly this new child of the husband, the new couple, was ill and they had to dash off to the hospital, and then suddenly there was this window of opportunity. So I thought she did quite brilliantly to pull it all together with the money out of the bank and the car seat, and I thought that was quite good. I mean, and perhaps it was all going to just be like driving off a cliff, but
Well,
she wanted
Janet,
that
you're right
time.
about up until that point, but she had no plan where she was going to go. How was she going to get money? How was she going to get food?
Yeah,
How was she going to elude the police? I mean,
right. I think she wanted time with her daughter, and that her
right,
love
but at
was not
most it was going to
logical.
be a week or two or a month if she was really lucky.
I think she
And
was aware of that. She just loved
right,
that
right. But
child.
then, I mean, she was suicidal during half the book. And so she was going to end up in a worse prison than the school for mothers. So it was like, well, what's going to happen? She's going to complete her total breakdown. I felt like that,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and she's
I
not going to
don't
be
think it was.
there. She's
I don't
not going
think
to
it
be
was
there when her daughter turns 18.
right. Yeah, I don't think it was that was a logical decision at all. But she just wanted to be with her.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I feel
I
like
don't
I had
know
to.
if you've, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if any of you have had like total mental breakdowns or depression before, but that's sort of the point where you stop thinking logically. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's, I read this book when it first came out, which is now over a year ago. So I'm kind of remembering it at the same time as we're talking about it. But I was just scrolling through on my stupid e-reader, and she has this paragraph where she says like all the stuff where if Gus, by the way, stupid name, she doesn't need a guy like that. If she had managed to keep him, like what she would have had to do to keep their marriage alive. And it says if she'd been healthier, easier to live with, if she'd stayed on Zoloft, hadn't relapsed, if he hadn't experienced her hysterical crying spells, her anxiety spirals, etc., etc. I have no idea what page that is because it's all percentages on here, but it's near the beginning. And I think like it's important to keep that in mind. Like nothing she does in the book is rational, not a single thing, because she's not in a good mental place. And she chose, like, ironically, she chose to fuck up her own mental state to have a baby because she was afraid of what the medication would do to the baby. So if that's not like the hallmark of trying to be a good mother, then I'm not really sure what is. And I don't disagree with Larry. She is not particularly sympathetic. I mean, nobody is in the book, but I'm not sure they're supposed to be entirely relatable. I mean, for people like us, not to make assumptions about everybody, but like, I think it's safe to say none of us are really on the margins of society in most ways, whereas the child of Chinese immigrants, someone who's severely depressed and has mental health issues, that's kind of a different demographic of person. And rather than relating to her, I think it's supposed to show us that like there are people that society just absolutely fails and who just fall through the cracks of this system that for all of us is working pretty well, super well, pretty well. And so we can look at it and say, well, you should have tried harder. Like, you know, it's not that hard. We're all doing it, but we're not like her. And I think that's kind of the point that the writer was trying to make, maybe to people like us or to people like her, that, you know, not everyone has the chance to succeed. And what does it look like when you're pretty much doomed to fail from the beginning? Not super cheery, but very educational, I think.
I think the point, what Kate said about her not making rational choices is interesting, because nobody in the book, not a one of them makes any rational choices. Not just her, none of the people that are supposed to help her, none of the people that are related to her, nobody's making a single rational choice and their choices are maybe just as detrimental as hers. I was reminded of the cliche that I'm sure you've all heard, that, you know, I was a perfect parent until I had children. Yeah.
I guess one other thing I would say is, I recently watched Everything Everywhere All at Once for a second time.
Oh,
And it's even better the second time. But that movie was the opposite of this book. This book, to me, reinforced negative Asian stereotypes of the Asian woman who's passive, unable to stand up for herself or her baby. Whereas in that movie, every character in that book, in at least one of the multiverses, does end up asserting themselves and breaking out of their depression and inertia and stagnation in life. And I don't disagree with you, Kate, that the author intends for us to be super upset and see what it's like. But I guess to me, the real world is depressing enough that I was like, give us something, give us, I didn't think she was really happy at the end, even though she was finally with her daughter, because her daughter didn't know her. And it's sad to say, it seemed like she knew her doll much better than she knew her real daughter. And the doll ended up being more responsive to her than her real daughter did, which was triply sad.
Yeah, so I mean, we're sure she's going to get caught and end up in jail. And I don't know, and I'm just projecting, maybe the idea is that, remember, she puts the picture in the little girl's coat so her parents will find it, so they can have proof of this insane place where Frida was held captive for a year, basically. And maybe in her mind, it'd be easier for her to be in jail. She knows even if she hadn't kidnapped Harriet, knew she wasn't going to get to see her until she was 18. Maybe in her mind, it's just easier to put herself in jail, so there's a better excuse not to be able to see her than just a court order. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. But I think the different kinds of families here. Like Meryl had horrible upbringing, no support. But Frida probably could have had support from her parents had she asked. She did have support. She had lots of financial support. She just didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want to ask. And her parents, of course, that was the horrible thing for her to do to them too. If she just asked for help, they would have given her help or would have come to her. So yeah, it's a very tragic story. Allison.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's why I think what, Kate said about her having had, a breakdown and is really, really important. I mean, I myself had a depressive episode in my 30s, and I mean, it's real hard to function in a normal way and just sort of do the things you need to do. And I mean, I think it puts her at a terrible disadvantage. She's so psychically vulnerable, so that it's, I mean, even in moments when I was judging her, like, really, you left your baby for 2 hours? It's like, it was hard not to be judgmental about that, especially being hit with it early on. But I don't know. I mean, she just is very psychologically vulnerable, I think, and I thought she did really pretty well given that she was in the situation that she was in. I mean, when she's in the darn school and stuff, she was trying. I'm not being very articulate about that, but anyway.
I think it's also like an interesting commentary on parenting styles across cultures. Like, I mean, Nancy, you were saying she could have asked her parents for help, and she definitely should have. I think we can all agree. But I mean, from what I know of Chinese families, it's like once you grow up, then you're the one who's meant to take care of your parents. It's considered not bad, but just something you don't do, relying on them past a certain age. And I mean, she was obviously, I think Frida grew up in America. So like, it's not like she's coming straight from China and doesn't know any other culture. But I think that kind of tension between parenting styles comes up a lot in the book as well, because Susanna and Gust are kind of like the typical like millennial Fruit Loopy parents who are like way too involved in everything and basically batshit. And then Frida's parents are like kind of your classic Chinese parents that are like pretty hands off, but not any less loving. And I mean, Japan is very, very different from China, but even here, it's like parents and children don't say they love each other here. It's considered very weird. Whereas I think if you had a mother in the book who wasn't saying to her kid that she loved them, they would probably be sent to the school for good mothers, being like, you're not being affectionate enough. But there's also that like cultural difference that I think is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think if Frida hadn't been Chinese American, it could have been a totally different story. Any different culture could have ended up being a totally different book, which would be interesting too, to hear, the different family relationships, if it's like an intergenerational or not. It would have been a different story. Larry, did you want to say something?
Well, what about the fact that the school for fathers seemed 100% better?
Right.
They didn't take
That's
away
what
the phone calls. There weren't all these punishments.
Yeah.
The school for fathers seemed halfway decent, certainly in comparison. And I suppose that was just layering on the typical sexism on top of everything else. But that, I mean, the whole curriculum and everything else was just so hypocritical. And I mean, they're beating the dolls to a frenzy, and then the mothers, I mean, the rules that they had where the mothers could only kiss a certain number of times or hug a certain number of times. It's like, even in a dystopian world, if somebody left that school and did what they said, they would have been a horrible mother still, because they had no understanding about what it was to be a mother. And I wanted somebody at least leak an expose to the press. I mean, the idea that nobody in the world knew about it, and even when she gets out, she doesn't tell any of the, Gus, her parents, she tells no one about what happened. So it was like there were things she could have done, because even a person who's depressed or having a breakdown can still, I mean, she did get up to a fair rating at one point. I don't disagree, Allison, that she did well through part of it, but then it was like, to what end? She was still totally screwed. She never had a chance. It didn't seem to matter what she did.
So maybe that's the ending, Cindy, that it should have been. Instead of ending up in jail because she kidnapped Harriet, she should have written the expose when she signed the non-disclosure. That's how she should end up in jail instead. Maybe that would have been a more satisfying end for some of us.
That would have been a more satisfying bow to tie up the package. And I don't think it would have fixed all my complaints with the book. For me to like a book, I usually need to like some of the characters, and ideally the main character. But because I did warm up somewhat to her when she was in this school, which was really more like a cult, where there was no right thing. It was like Alice in Wonderland. The rules kept changing. I mean, everything just slipped and slid, so that no matter how hard you tried, there was no way you were. Maybe the women that won were the ones that killed themselves. I mean, it was pretty dark. So apparently we have a real difference in our style. I don't like reading really dark books that don't give me some hope. And where was the hope in here?
Okay, I'm not going to give you any hope with this question, but here's the question. So remember how the mothers didn't even acknowledge that they were born, that they had birthdays? Where does it switch when you go from being the child that all of the attention, everything is done for the child, when that child grows up and she becomes the mother? Where does that switch go where she becomes completely selfless? When you've raised these children that they're the sole focus, and mother is only there to be the mother. I'm just projecting, like, after these children that are the children of the students in the school, how do they learn to become mothers themselves when they've been the sole focus? Then when they have to turn the corner and become the selfless mothers. I'm just projecting a little bit.
I don't know how that's possible.
Exactly. When they're telling the mothers that they have to be completely selfless, and then when these children grow up and they become the mothers, how do they turn that corner?
Yeah, I mean, that selflessness, I mean, that's like the Victorian angel in the house, the mother who was everything, and I mean, no one can be that, we're all human. I guess the dystopian aspect of it was just bothered me so much. It's like it hits too close to home to, some of the things that Larry brought up about things that are happening in the world today, and yeah. When did you feel this was happening in time? Did it feel like, I mean, a lot of times it feels like right now, but then part of me felt like, is this a little bit in the future? When
it happened right after Trump becomes president again.
Please. Please don't say
Oh,
that.
that's not funny. Oh,
So much for injecting hope.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the most likely scenarios right now. I'm just saying, and that's if reality was fiction, you would say, well, that's far-fetched. And I still remember fighting with a friend of mine in 2015 saying, oh, Larry, Trump is so entertaining. He'll never get elected. And I'm like, no, you cannot go wrong by underestimating the stupidity of the American people. He can get elected. And, you know, with some of his supporters, he's more popular than ever.
No, nobody said anything about this hat back here. Anybody notice?
What hat? Oh, we can't see it
You
clear
can't
enough.
see it.
Is it a Trump hat?
What do you think this hat says?
What does
What
it
is
say?
Is the writing backwards? It says,
Oh.
Can't read it.
"Need you look, Black Lives Matter." I left this in the store and I just left it here because it makes me laugh every time I see it.
Funny.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, not everybody liked this book, but I still like it. Kate likes it. I don't know. I
I
like.
think maybe she wrote it as a call to action. That,
Well,
that
I
we don't
Yeah.
want this to happen. That
Well,
what our-
Lori, you're going to
Good
have to
point.
report to us what the author says was
yeah, I
her
will. Yes,
intent.
yeah, I'll let
Because
you know.
I would, again, maybe it's unfair to compare it to classic books, but you know, the firefighter in what is it? 450
Fahrenheit.
451.
Thank you. He starts reading books. That's such a great thing about, and it's, I mean, to me, it's still with the book banning today that resonates so much. And 1984, you know, war is peace, peace is war. We're doing that right now. But where was the larger societal thing in this book? That's another piece that was missing to me. If it was a call to action, then she should have done an expose, or there should have been one mother who was the Luke Skywalker of the School for Mothers who, you know, rebelled. I don't know that the women killing themselves was really heroic. I think the women who figured out a way to have sex or some fun were probably the most happy until they got caught.
Well, that character was one and the same, unfortunately, in both those situations. So.
Was it? Okay. Well, I had trouble keeping track of the minor characters because I felt like she didn't develop them enough.
Well, I just want to say that the main characters of all these classic books, to me, they're just generic white dudes. They've got no personality. The dude from 1984, who even remembers that guy? You know, we remember the story, but these people, like, I mean, maybe they're relatable to some people, but I read those books and I'm like, ugh, another one named Will, John, something. To me, Frida was like a real person. I related to her way more. Just saying. I had to put that up.
I second that, Kate. I have that same reaction to those books. Like, oh God, another guy. And none of the guys don't get in nearly as much trouble in this book. Nobody does. The husband, the guys in the men's school. The men's school is
I
easier.
almost felt like she just tacked the men's school on there. Like it could have been left out of the book, really. I just wonder if she thought maybe her editor said, maybe you should, people are going to ask a question about it. Maybe you should put a dad's school.
To show that they weren't held to the same level.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess, yeah.
Mhm.
But it would have been just as well if it had been left out too, I think. I mean, just because that would be probably more likely.
Well, I mean, hopefully, in 40 years, Margaret Atwood wrote The Handmaid's Tale about 40 years ago. Hopefully in 40 years, we aren't referring to this book the way that we refer to The Handmaid's Tale now as a guidebook of what not to do. So.
But there was rebellion too in The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So that's, I guess, some of us are objecting to this author's worldview that, it's always darkest before dawn. And in her book, it's even darker the next day.
Okay, so next month, we're gonna turn this all around. On April 19th, we're gonna read The Half-Known Life in Search of Paradise by Pico Iyer. So I haven't read this yet. James read it and loved it. I think it's going to be fabulous. I am really excited to read this. So what a fascinating life this author has had. He's been a friend of the Dalai Lama since he was a child. So and
Nancy, is this nonfiction? Is it a memoir?
This is nonfiction. I don't think it's a memoir. Pico Iyer writes lots of travel books. So this is kind of a book about how a lot of the places in the world that we call paradise aren't actually paradise, that elusive place where anxieties, struggles, and burdens of life fall away. Most of us dream of it, but each of us has a very different idea about where it is to be found. For some, it can be enjoyed only after death. For others, it's in our midst or just across the ocean, if only we can find eyes to see it. So he travels the world looking for these places, doing some of the history on it. So yeah, so he goes to a Buddhist monastery for, I don't know, like months out every year. And he just seems like a fascinating character. So James really enjoyed this, and hopefully we all will as well. So yes, quite a departure from the dystopia or the speculative fiction. So we'll give this one a shot, and maybe Burnham Wood will be May, or maybe we'll find something else, or maybe somebody else has a great idea of one they would like us to read and discuss. Or if you have something you've liked lately, let us know. It doesn't have to be a new book. If there's an older book that you would like us to consider, we can do that too. And Allison, I don't know if everybody got to see the newsletter today, but
Nancy.
I'm sorry, I have to. Allison was in New York City earlier this month as one of the 5 finalists for the Penn Award for essay collections. You know, it was just Allison and David Sedaris and Jhumpa Lahiri and, you know, just Allison and those guys. So no big deal.
And Judith Thurman of the New Yorker, you know, who's the one that got the award, as well she should have, you know. I mean, you don't write for the New Yorker for 30 years and not get that award, you know. So yeah,
But
it
our
was.
Allison was there.
So Allison, did you get any swag for being nominated?
Oh, not really. I mean, somebody said to me, "Are you going to get stickers to put on your books?" Oh,
You should.
I think I brought home they had a quote open bar. I was not drinking anything before the event. Yeah, I was too nervous to drink. Where
was the event in New York?
It was at Town Hall in Manhattan. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's cool. Congratulations.
Yeah. But it was wild. I mean, yeah, and just wild behind the scenes. I mean, on the stage, it was like puffs of purple smoke, and Cal Penn was the master of ceremonies, and it was just like, just crazy. Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. That's so sweet of you. Yeah.
Oh,
I was really happy to get back to Wisconsin.
Okay, so we will see you on April 19th next month for this one. All right, thank you for everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Nancy.
Nancy. Bye-bye.